I'm exploding with joy. I feel like the happiest person in earth. It's just amazing that the day came and it's now and it's happening.
Free at last. After more than 2 years in captivity, the last 20 living Israeli hostages are freed from Gaza in exchange for the release of more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. As families rejoice, diplomatic hard work is ongoing to keep a fragile peace accord on track. Who are the 7 new saints welcomed this weekend into the Catholic Church? A report from the EWTN Vatican Bureau.
We need to look for music that engages our intellect, our emotion, our will, everything about us.
And we go in depth and in tune with Catholic Mass music, a look at the rich variety of music that lifts our souls, and discussion of some music that has been banned and why. EWTN News In Depth starts now.
None of this would have been possible without the leadership and determination of President Trump. For months, he pushed forward when others hesitated, proving that courage and conviction can change history.
After more than 700 days under captivity in Gaza, 20 Israeli hostages finally return home. Hostage families and supporters thanked U.S. President Donald Trump, whose peace plan helped secure their loved ones' freedom. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. Many are celebrating the president's monumental 20-point peace plan for Gaza. But even in its early stages, the plan is showing fault lines, proving just how complex and fragile this truce is. Israel accused Hamas of breaking the ceasefire agreement on Tuesday after it did not return all the bodies of the remaining 28 deceased hostages. The group's military wing says the 9 hostage bodies it has returned early this week are the only ones it can access, and that special equipment is needed to retrieve the others. Israeli Defense Forces have limited the number of aid trucks into the Gaza Strip in an attempt to pressure Hamas to return the other remains. They told the Trump administration they will not proceed with the peace plan until Tel Aviv receives all the deceased hostages. Despite these setbacks and the concerns over the future of Trump's peace plan, the week began with joy as the last remaining Israeli hostages returned home.
Thousands of Israelis flooded Tel Aviv's hostages square on Monday morning, as they have often done throughout the past 2 years. This time, they gathered not in anger and mourning, but in celebration, as they eagerly waited the release of 20 hostages, the last living captives who were abducted by Hamas 2 years ago on October 7th. The Red Cross transported them to Israel in a peaceful exchange, a stark difference from Hamas's taunting ceremonies in previous hostage transfers. In Re'im, families reunited with loved ones they feared they might never see again.
So, we're happy, and it's very hard for me to take off the smile from my face, but on the same time, we understand that it's not going to be easy, but we're very happy that this agreement finally happened.
As those reunions took place, President Trump traveled to Israel and Egypt for a victory lap, touting his 20-point peace plan. In a speech to Israel's parliament, he called it a historic dawn of a new Middle East.
After so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
The groundbreaking deal lays out a roadmap to end the war in Gaza and establish lasting peace in the region. In this first phase, Israel has withdrawn troops from some of Gaza's most populated areas and allowed hundreds of aid trucks to enter the hunger-ridden enclave. Israeli hostages were exchanged for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees, who also received a joyous welcome home.
The feeling of life and freedom is completely different from the loneliness of prison, the shouting of the jailers in their torture. But thank God the war in Gaza has ended. Being with my family again and being able to see them in good shape is the greatest reward.
After 2 previous ceasefires devolved back into bloodshed, many express cautious optimism that this peace deal will hold. Trump says he ended the war in Gaza and began the second phase of his 20-point plan. But Aaron David Miller, a former Middle East negotiator for the State Department, says the path toward true and lasting peace remains long and complicated.
I think it's an extraordinary moment, but a moment. This is not a peace agreement. There is no guarantee that a first phase will lead to a second, nor the inexorable end of the Israeli-Hamas war.
Trump's peace plan calls for the creation of an international stabilization force to oversee Gaza's peaceful transition and a board of peace to ensure Gaza's costly redevelopment, though it's unclear who will take part and who will provide funding. And Israeli defense forces will not fully pull out of the Gaza Strip until Hamas gives up its weapons, a concession the militant group has refused before and may not likely agree to now.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Despite these complex roadblocks, the Washington Institute's Gaith Al-Omari believes Trump's plan for peace is gaining momentum.
You saw how many people gathered in Egypt for the meeting. You saw the reception the president got in Israel at the Knesset. So I think we have momentum. The question is, how do you use the momentum to kind of fine-tune all of these big issues?
Difficult questions do remain about Gaza's future, including whether Hamas will disarm and who will govern and help rebuild the territory. Our next guests share their perspectives on what is necessary for stability in Gaza as the war-torn area seeks a semblance of normalcy. Nadine Mayenza is a leading voice for international religious freedom. She serves as co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Roundtable in Washington, D.C., and as chair of the Institute for Global Engagement. She joins us from her travels in Taiwan. Mati Friedman is a Jerusalem-based journalist and author. A former Associated Press correspondent in Jerusalem, Mati also previously served in the Israeli Defense Forces in the 1990s. He joins us from Jerusalem. Thank you both for being here. Mati, I want to begin with you. Paint the picture for how people are feeling in Israel this week following the release of the hostages.
It's certainly a feeling that has been quite unfamiliar to us for the past 2 years, which is a feeling of relief and I would say cautious optimism. The weather has changed here, both literally. Things have cooled down and the winter breezes have started to blow and the weather seems to have changed politically. The feeling here is that there isn't exactly jubilation about the future. There's certainly happiness about the return of 20 live Israeli hostages who were kept in tunnels in Gaza for 2 years. And there's a sense that this war that seemed to be endless, that seemed increasingly to many Israelis, I think, to be pointless, that has ended. And we can smell the possibilities of a better future. Israelis have been through so much not just in the past 2 years, but in the past, generations, that they know not to get carried away with optimism. Unfortunately, in the Middle East, the options are limited and they're rarely utopian. But I'm hoping both for us here in Israel and for our neighbors in Gaza and in the West Bank that we're at least looking at a period that will be quieter and safer for everyone concerned, and that I hope that it lasts,
Right.
5, 10 years. I don't want to get carried away.
Absolutely. Nadine, President Donald Trump repeatedly touted the Abraham Accords in his Middle East trip earlier this week. Can you refresh our memory? What are the Abraham Accords and what is President Trump attempting to do by frequently recalling them?
Yeah, so they were a series of groundbreaking agreements brokered by the Trump administration during his first term. normalizing relations between Israel and some Arab countries. I was able to attend the White House ceremony with the first Abraham Accord signing, which was between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain in September of 2020. And then later, Morocco and Sudan also joined. And part of why these are so historic is they broke this decades of Arab consensus, really, that there would never be peace with Israel until there was a Palestinian state. And so, and no doubt, this strengthens deterrence against Iran is really the biggest foreign policy achievement of the first Trump administration.
Thank you for that reminder. Mati, looking ahead now, can you give us a sense of what comes next when it comes to military withdrawal in the beginning stages of rebuilding Gaza?
I've been a journalist in this part of the world for long enough to know that any prediction that I make will make me look very stupid within probably a week and certainly within a month. I think we're looking at a period of prolonged instability inside Gaza. What we've seen in the areas of Gaza that have been ceded by the Israeli military after the withdrawal in the past week, we've seen massacres of opponents of Hamas. We've seen a lot of settling of scores in a very violent fashion inside Gaza. So I think that it's quite important, and I think that there's a recognition that it's very important to get some kind of stabilizing force inside Gaza to allow things to at least begin to be rebuilt. There's a report over the past day or two that the rebuilding will begin in Rafah, which is a city in the very southern part of Gaza on the border with Egypt, which is quite tragically a good candidate for reconstruction because much of the city has been destroyed and it's not currently controlled by Hamas. So a lot is riding on what happens in the next few weeks. If Hamas is allowed to restore complete control in Gaza and eliminate all of its opponents, which it's trying to do right now as we speak, then it's going to be much harder to dislodge them in a month. If the international community, whatever that is, if it moves quickly to stabilize Gaza, and if the Trump administration can make some decisive moves right now to kind of move things in a different direction, then we might see a prolonged process of reconstruction and a slow movement towards stability. Anyone expecting to see, a democratic liberal government emerge in the Gaza Strip is going to be disappointed. But I think that the optimists among us might hope for a prolonged period of stability that will allow the very hard-hit people in Gaza who've been through a tremendous amount over the past years to rebuild a semblance of normal life.
Holding on to that hope right now, absolutely. Nadine, what have these past 2 years been like specifically for Christians in the Holy Land? What is the state of Christianity there?
Well, with all the news of Iraq and Syria, the Christians dropping dramatically, and I spent a lot of time in both countries. We have 100,000 Christians left in Iraq, about 200,000 maybe in Syria. Most would expect that to be the same in Israel, but actually the Christian community has been growing in Israel, and that's due to the relatively stable environment where churches can operate freely. They have a freedom of worship, access to education, jobs, no discrimination for being Christians, a lot of support from the international community. But of course, in the Palestinian areas, that number has dropped drastically, especially in Gaza, where I believe we're close to 450 Christians left. So it says a lot about the conditions that actually Christianity is thriving in the Holy Land.
Wow. Monty,
parts of the Holy Land.
Right. Monty, you've written that the pro-Palestine activists who have been demanding an immediate ceasefire seem to be opposing this peace plan. Can you expand on that point?
It's been striking to see that the protest movement against Israel over the past 2 years, which has really rallied under the slogan ceasefire, and at the recent Academy Awards, you had all kinds of celebrities wearing pins saying ceasefire and stickers saying ceasefire, and President Trump seems quite incredibly to have negotiated a ceasefire. It's quite an amazing accomplishment, kind of wrangling everyone into this agreement that we're seeing over the past week. And suddenly all of these hundreds of thousands of people who've been rallying in cities across the West seem at best very quiet about the ceasefire, and at worst quite unhappy that there's a ceasefire. And as someone who's observed this movement evolve over many years, it's quite clear to me that it was never about a ceasefire. It's about helping Israel's enemies defeat Israel. And at the beginning of the war, when it seemed that Israel had the upper hand, or certainly it had more international sympathy in the wake of October 7th, then it was very important to force a ceasefire so that Israel would not be able to defeat its enemies, in this case, Hamas. And I think that hypocrisy has really been revealed over the past week. You've been calling for a ceasefire for 2 years. We have one. That's exactly what we have. Israel has agreed to it, which I think proves to anyone who is skeptical that this war has been, for most Israelis, almost entirely about rescuing the hostages. Why do we see that now? Because the hostages are home, at least all the live hostages, and Israel has agreed to a ceasefire. So the political script, I guess, and the anti-Israel movement has been disrupted by the events of the past week. In fact, for many anti-Israel activists, particularly in the West, the continuation of the war would be better. It suits their goals better. But of course, for the average Palestinian in Gaza who's dealing with incredible suffering that's been caused by Hamas and caused by Hamas's insistence on keeping the Israeli captives in the tunnels and not releasing them, for most people in Gaza, I imagine this ceasefire is a much needed relief. And I imagine that there's an increasing gap between real Palestinians on the ground and their Western supporters who have very little to do with reality or place in question.
Nadine, from your perspective, what will be essential for stability in the region? What will you be looking out for to that extent as the peace deal continues to unfold?
Well, the question is really, will Hamas follow the 20-point peace plan they agreed to? And of course, none of us are going to try to guess, but I do know that the whole Middle East is holding their breath. And I'm in Taiwan, and people here are watching with close anticipation. You know, we all know peace is a good thing, and there's been a lot of suffering with this war, and we all want it to be over. You know, Israel has done what it said it would do. It released all the prisoners before even getting back all of the bodies of the deceased. And at this point in time, Hamas has not returned it. In fact, I know that Israel Foreign Ministry just tweeted not long ago that their displeasure, saying we're only at the beginning of President Trump's 20-point plan, and Hamas is preventing us from progressing to the next phase. So the question will be really how will the President Trump and Israel take this, and will they disarm? We're so disappointed to see 7,000 Hamas militants come up from underground and start executing those they're calling collaborators and outlaws, and accusing them of working with Israel. To see that brutal violence posted on social media, asking the residents to come and watch, it's showing the face of who Hamas is and how brutal their rule has been, which is why Christians haven't been able to survive there. And frankly, a lot of people have left, have tried their best to leave Gaza, those that could, because this brutal violence, and it simply can't continue any longer. So the question will be, what will happen if Hamas isn't going to follow? I know the president has made some threats that he will disarm them if they don't disarm. So we're all going to have to watch and see what Hamas's next steps are.
Absolutely. And speaking of peace, Nadine, another question to you. Pope Leo will be making his first apostolic journey to Turkey and Lebanon later next month, with a focus on promoting unity and peace in the Middle East. Your thoughts on how significant that trip could be?
I was just in Lebanon a few weeks ago, and they are excited with anticipation. The President's office, all the different religious communities. This is such a crucial time for Lebanon and for the region to be able to look to the higher goals of peace and what it means to accept the human dignity of one another, even if we still have different political views, different religious views, how we can look at each other as one people. And I think that that's what the Pope can bring to the region. So this is a perfect time for him to come, and really looking forward to seeing the fruit of this trip.
Yeah. Monty, I have 1 minute left, but I do want to give you the last word. It was a joyful week as we watch those 20 live hostages return, but the agony does continue for families of deceased hostages who still wait for the bodies of their loved ones. How are they feeling in this moment?
I think that some of the families who have, as you said, deceased hostages still in Gaza are worried that they're going to be left behind, because everyone is so eager for a happy ending and people want to move on. And the story is not quite concluded as far as Israel is concerned. And it's not just that we have 15 or more bodies of our hostages that are still being held in Gaza. We have almost 2,000 fatalities in this war. There are people whose loved ones will never come home. I knew one, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who's an American citizen who was kidnapped from a music festival and then murdered by Hamas in a tunnel last summer. I just spent a few hours with his mother today. And for them, of course, they're happy that the rest of the hostages have come home. They're happy to see this war end, but for them, the loss is permanent. And for the families of 2,000 Israelis, that's the case. So the tragedy is coming to a close, but I hope, but for many people in Israel and of course in Gaza, the pain is not going to go away.
No, absolutely not. Well, I thank you both for bringing your expertise to this discussion. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. having us.
And we are just getting started on this edition of EWTN News In Depth. There is much more ahead.
This Sunday, Pope Leo will canonize 7 new saints. I'm Rudolf Gehrig here in Rome for EWTN, and we will introduce you to the new saints.
From a former Satanist who became a devotee of the Rosary to a first-generation Christian in the South Pacific killed for his beliefs. The story of our 7 new saints is next.
As a Catholic, you can appreciate even music that's not of your particular preference, that you can at least see the beauty of it and why others would be moved by it.
And later, the vast variety of Catholic Mass music, from Gregorian chant to praise and worship to familiar hymns from the 19th century, and why some music has been banned. The rich tapestry of church music and the doctrine behind it coming up.
The restart of humanitarian aid to Gaza has prompted Pope Leo XIV to donate medicine for children there. The shipment of 5,000 doses of antibiotics began following the ceasefire and the start of the first phase of the new peace deal. The delivery was coordinated by the Vatican dicastery in charge of carrying out charitable works for the poor and those in need on behalf of the Pope. The Vatican says it is putting into practice the words of Pope Leo's recent exhortation, Dilexi Te, to love and cherish the poor. Catholics around the world eagerly await the canonization this weekend of the Church's newest saints. Vatican Bureau reporter Rudolf Gehrig tells us about the 7 blesseds who are being elevated to sainthood.
In the year 79 AD, the Roman city of Pompeii suffered the greatest catastrophe imaginable. Even today, the ruins bear witness to the destructive inferno of the volcano that destroyed the entire city. Almost 1,800 years later, a man arrived in the city who was involved not only in its reconstruction, but also in its spiritual renewal. Bartolo Longo, a former Satanist who came to Pompeii after his conversion to promote devotion to the Rosary.
He does make a particular mention that he was a satanic priest, which is an interesting thing, that he didn't actually just participate or attend these kind of occult rituals, but it seems to be that he was actually participating in the structure and committed to it in a certain way, that he was active in the organization, the rituals of it.
As a lawyer, Bartolo also provided legal services for the poor of the city of Pompeii, recognizing their vulnerability and how much they were being taken advantage of.
St. John Paul II referred to him as the apostle of the Rosary. And I think what Bartolo Longo puts in front of us is, yes, a tremendous conversion of life, but I also see a true dedication to the vulnerable in that we see in front of us this very day. But what is the kind of engine that drives all of that is the devotion to the Rosary.
Pope Benedict XVI likened Bartolo Longo to the Apostle Paul, who also initially persecuted the Church.
After that conversion, Bartolo began to actually go back to the exact places that he participated in these occult activities. And now being very firmly rooted in his faith and his devotion to the Blessed Mother, would actually, kind of stand up in these occult practices, seances and things like that, and stand up and with a rosary in his hand and claim these moments for the Blessed Mother and encourage all that were participating to reject their past, reject their ways, and turn to the Blessed Mother for protection and happiness. The other thing, he was very close friends with Leo XIII. And so to have Leo XIV be the one canonizing him is a beautiful kind of act of providence.
In addition to Bartolo Longo, Pope Leo will also canonize Ignatius Shukrala Maloyan, an Armenian bishop who was murdered in 1915, as well as 2 Italian nuns, Vincenza Maria Polloni and Maria Troncati. Many pilgrims from Latin America are also expected over the weekend here in Rome, as Pope Leo will canonize 2 Venezuelans, Maria Carmen Rendillas Martinez and José Gregorio Hernández Cisneros. Mother Carmen was beatified in Caracas in 2018.
Madre Carmen, Nata e morta a Caracas.
Mother Carmen was born and died in Caracas in the last century. Together with her sisters, she served with love in parishes, in schools, and alongside the needy. Let us praise the Lord for this faithful disciple of his, and let us entrust our prayers for the people of Venezuela to her intercession.
Per il popolo venezuelano.
While Mother Carmen Rendiles founded the Siervas de Jesus de Venezuela Sisters, José Cisneros served his fellow countrymen as a doctor. Both saints still enjoy great popularity in Venezuela today. In 2023, Pope Francis praised José Cisneros as a role model.
He was a good and joyful person with a cheerful disposition. He was endowed with a marked intelligence. He became a physician, a university professor, and a scientist, but he was first and foremost a doctor close to the weakest. So much so that he was known in his homeland as the doctor of the poor.
Catholics in Papua New Guinea are also looking forward to next Sunday because, for the first time, one of their compatriots will be canonized. Born in 1912 and raised in a devout Christian household, Peter Torot was commissioned as a catechist by German missionaries.
Peter Torot is a beautiful figure, a husband, a father, and a catechist. He comes from the very first generation of Christians in Papua New Guinea. His parents were among the first to be baptized.
In 1945, he publicly denounced the promotion of polygamy, which the Japanese had encouraged in order to ingratiate themselves with local tribes. Peter Torot was arrested and after 2 months in prison was secretly executed by lethal injection. In March 2025, 1 month before his death, Pope Francis issued a decree giving the green light for the canonization of Peter Torot. Pope Leo is now continuing this legacy.
Noi viviamo l'anno giubilare che
We are living through a Jubilee year marked by the theme of hope. The new saints speak directly of hope. They address individual churches, the universal church, and all of humanity. The lives of the new saints, both martyrs and confessors, who have dedicated their energy in different parts of the world, serve as seeds of hope.
Ecco, questa vita appunto è un seme di speranza.
The canonizations are not only a moment of hope, but also a moment of pride, because it shows that the Universal Church recognizes and cherishes the treasures found in local piety. In Rome, Rudolf Gehrig, EWTN News in Depth.
All you holy men and women, pray for us. And those canonizations aren't the only excitement at the Vatican this week. Pope Leo has received many unique gifts so far in his pontificate: a papal motorcycle, a papal ping pong table, and now a papal horse. The Holy Father met Proton, the purebred Arabian stallion, on Wednesday morning. A Polish breeder wanted to give Pope Leo the horse as a nod to his years in Peru, where he frequently rode horses. The Holy Father seemed very happy with his new gift, which will live in Castel Gandolfo's Equestrian Center. His busy schedule gives him little time for horsing around, but some speculate he might take Proton for rides on his Tuesdays off. News headlines are next in the Week in Review, including a Vatican announcement and the sexual abuse case of disgraced artist Father Marco Rupnik, whose famous mosaics adorn basilicas around the world. We'll be right back. Continued government dysfunction tops the Week in Review as the government shutdown enters its third week. While the House of Representatives remains in recess, the Senate took several votes but failed to advance a bill to fund the government. On Wednesday, a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from firing more federal workers during the shutdown, saying she believes evidence will show the job cuts are illegal. In the meantime, there are zero talks and negotiations between Democrats and Republicans.
there has to be a willingness amongst Republicans to actually have a conversation. And since the White House meeting over 2 weeks ago, Republicans have gone radio silent. Donald Trump has spent more time on the golf course than talking to Democrats on Capitol Hill.
We're not playing games. They're playing a game. We're not. The strategy is to do the right and obvious thing and keep the government moving for the people.
In the meantime, Speaker Johnson is refusing to swear in a new Democratic member of the House until the House is back in regular session. Adelita Grajava of Arizona won a special election representing more than 800,000 Arizonians nearly 4 weeks ago. She says her voters deserve representation in Congress. Grajava will provide the final signature needed to force a House discharge petition compelling the Justice Department to release Jeffrey Epstein's child sex trafficking files. Johnson said this week that the delay in swearing her in has nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. In a plan drawing increased scrutiny amid the shutdown, all systems are a go for the use of $20 billion in U.S. taxpayer dollars to pay for an economic bailout of Argentina. The leader of Argentina was at the White House on Tuesday. His political party faces tough midterms later this month. During their visit, President Trump publicly said what other administrations have not. He advocated for a specific outcome of a foreign election.
And he may win and he may not win, but I think he's going to win. And if he wins, we're staying with him. And if he doesn't win, we're gone.
Tying American aid to the outcome of the election, Trump called President Javier Milei's success very important. For his part, Milei blames Argentina's economic turmoil and inflation on his political opponents, though he has been president for nearly 2 years now. The American bailout is designed to prop up Argentina's plunging currency value, which could push Argentina into financial collapse. Milei has long been a Trump favorite. He was the first world leader to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago after last November's election. You might remember he also famously presented Elon Musk with the chainsaw he held above his head, symbolizing Doge cuts to the federal government. With no end in sight in the government shutdown, though members of Congress continue to receive their salaries, there will be no more paychecks for essential federal workers who are required to remain on the job, like air traffic controllers.
Air traffic controllers are supposed to mitigate risk. Air traffic controllers ensure that risk is out of the system so that those who fly and those who we serve, that they are safe. And this brings a risk where their focus is now on, when I get off my shift today, do I have to go and drive Uber tonight?
As flight delays and other disruptions start to hit America's airports, the head of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association demanded an end to the shutdown, telling lawmakers to stop waiting for federal workers who live paycheck to paycheck to be the ones to break before fixing the government. And this week, for the first time in U.S. history, military members were due to miss their first paychecks. But the Pentagon is using unobligated funds in its research and development account to meet a one-time payroll. It is unclear what legal authority allows such a transfer of funds between accounts and where money would come from for the next pay period if the shutdown continues. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's challenge to the Pentagon press corps has resulted in a mass exodus. In a near unanimous united front, journalists left the building on Wednesday upon loss of their Pentagon credentials. For the first time since the Pentagon opened in 1943, there are no major news outlets accredited to cover the department, one that spends a huge chunk of America's annual budget. Hegseth tried to institute a new press policy in which news outlets had to sign a pledge to only report, quote, explicitly authorized information or else lose their Pentagon access. Those outlets almost unanimously rejected what they called an attempt to muzzle freedom of the press guaranteed under the First Amendment. A retired admiral who served 2 times as the Defense Department's press secretary says neither the Pentagon nor the American public wins by removal of the press corps from the building.
The message to the American people is they are now going to not get the kind of thoughtful, deliberate coverage that they should expect from the Defense Department, an agency that spends about $1 trillion a year, and their sons and daughters are being employed in dangerous places around the world and even here in the country. They have a right to know those things.
A partial list of the news outlets which refuse to agree to the new press policy include the 5 major broadcast networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, where Hegseth was a weekend co-host before the president tapped him to join his cabinet. Conservative outlet Newsmax also declined to go along with the plan, as did the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, NPR, Reuters, and the Associated Press. All of the outlets vowed to continue thorough coverage of Hegseth and the military from outside of the Pentagon's 5 walls. President Trump has posthumously awarded Charlie Kirk with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest honor, 1 month after the conservative activist and father was fatally shot at a campus event in Utah. Erica Kirk received the award on behalf of her husband on what would have been his 32nd birthday. The White House ceremony reflected the close ties between Trump and Kirk, who founded the conservative youth organization Turning Point USA and is credited with helping the president win last year's election. Now an update to a story we've been closely following. The Vatican announced its panel of judges in the disciplinary case against former Jesuit priest Marco Rupnik, who is accused of sexually and psychologically abusing women religious under his spiritual care. The Vatican made the announcement on Monday. The panel of judges includes both women and clerics, and none of its members have any connection to Vatican governance. More than 20 women have accused Rupnik of abuse in the 80s and 90s. The Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith began to investigate abuse allegations against Rupnik in 2023 after the late Pope Francis lifted the statute of limitations. His large mosaics are installed in major chapels, cathedrals, and basilicas all over the world, but many advocates for abuse victims have called for his art to be removed. To discuss the latest, we are joined by a veteran Catholic journalist who has been closely following the Rupnik case. Edward Penton is the senior correspondent for the National Catholic Register and an EWTN News Vatican analyst. Edward, thanks for being with us. What is the significance of this Vatican announcement that they have appointed judges to decide Rupnik's sexual abuse case?
Well, this shows, Catherine, that it moves from being just an inquiry to a proper trial for Father Rupnik. It's been long awaited, and obviously the victims are very keen that this proceeds quickly. So it's a very significant development, and I think it will please many of those who've been wanting to see justice in this case.
Speaking of proceeding quickly, now that the judges have been announced, do we have an updated timeline for this judicial procedure? What else do we know?
Yes, we don't know the date of the trial. We haven't been told that. But the speculation is that it will happen before the end of the year, but that's just speculation. We don't know for sure.
Well, we'll be closely following that, absolutely. Edward, the Vatican under Pope Francis faced criticism for what was perceived to be slow action or inaction to the Rupnik allegations. Now, Pope Francis did lift the statute of limitations 2 years ago after mounting pressure so that the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith could begin its own investigation into Rupnik. Edward, has Pope Leo signaled anything about what his approach to Rupnik might be? Has he acknowledged the criticism the church has faced for this case?
Well, he hasn't actually mentioned the Rupnik case in particular, Catherine, but he has mentioned the abuse issue, and he's promised to look carefully into the different abuse cases, but nothing specific about the Rupnik case. But at the same time, there have been images of Father Rupnik's art, which has been removed from Vatican News website. So there's been some development since he's become Pope, but nothing more than that.
And in fact, we actually have an image demonstrating that. We have an image of the Vatican News website that shows when Rupnik's art was up for the Sacred Heart Solemnity. And then on the right, this is for our viewers at home, you can see the updated Vatican News website where Rupnik's art has been removed. And this happened shortly after Pope Leo took office. Edward, the allegations facing Rupnik are very disturbing. Can you connect the dots for us as to why his art is associated with his abuse? Why do so many Catholics believe we can't separate the two?
Yes, well, it's really because it was really created, it happened within the context of the manipulation of the women, the victims, that the abuse happened. So the problem is that, or the seriousness of this is that the art is closely linked to the abuse, So unlike some other abuse cases where the art has been done sort of more separately, this is very much intertwined with the abuse, and so there's a real concern there that the art really has to be taken down.
Well, on that note, what is the latest regarding Rupnik's murals that are present at the church's top shrines around the world? Are they still up for the most part as this investigation is underway?
Well, some is, yes. Some of the artwork is still up, but there are certain areas where certain shrines, in particular, where his art has been shown, which is being covered up or removed. There's the sanctuary at Lourdes, which is one of them. There's the Shrine of Fatima has chosen not to remove a massive Rupnik wall, but it has stopped using its images. And then the Knights of Columbus have covered the Rupnik artwork in chapels in Washington, D.C. and New Haven. So there's been some movement on that, but other major sites haven't actually taken any steps yet to remove his artwork, but may do in the future, depending, I suppose, on the trial outcome.
Edward, as I mentioned in your introduction, you are this veteran Vatican journalist. You have been following this case for years. As a journalist, what stands out to you in particular about this story and how it's developed along the years? What are you reflecting on?
Well, I think that one of the disturbing aspects of this, beyond, of course, the victims and what happened to them, is the sort of cover-up, unfortunately, with this case. Many knew within the Vatican about it. There's allegations that Pope Francis knew, but nothing was really done. There were investigations, but they were done very quietly. It was only when the media drew attention to it that things really started moving. And that's often been the case, unfortunately, with the Vatican and the Church in general, or rather the institutional church, let's say, among the leaders and the prelates, that they'll only act once the media starts taking an interest, and certainly the big media. And that's been the case here as well. So again, this is a rather disturbing aspect, but I think there's hope that things will change because of this, and perhaps this will usher in a more transparent Vatican and Church in the future.
Transparency and hope for justice as well. Edward Penton, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Catherine.
3 major religious landmarks have reopened in the northern Iraq city of Mosul. After years of restoration, St. Thomas Church of the Syriac Orthodox community, the famous Al-Tahira Chaldean Catholic Church, and the Al-Rabia Mosque have reopened. They were badly damaged during the ISIS occupation between 2014 and 2017. The renovations of these century-old religious sites are part of an initiative between Iraq and international partners to safeguard the city's cultural, religious, and social diversity and to restore its historic monuments. Music is on our minds when we return.
And a symbol of God's grace.
Next, a lesson of sorts about Catholic Mass music, proper church doctrine, and why a bishop says a recent ban on some hymns was a mistake.
Music is meant to lift the soul and draw us closer to God. And based on a musical preference for the ancient sound of Gregorian chant or the singing of traditional old classics from a well-worn hymnal, or maybe a more modern praise and worship atmosphere, it's no secret some choose their parish based on liturgy preferences, and that includes the music. Reporter Mark Irons explores the rich variety of music common in the Catholic Mass, the importance of a proper link to Catholic doctrine, and a recent yet short-lived ban on some modern hymns in this Catholic Life report.
The sounds of Mass might sound a little different at any given parish. The music you hear at one church could vary greatly from another. At Sacred Heart Parish in Glendon, Maryland, music director Kevin Callahan is familiar with many styles. We asked him to play a number of hymns, both traditional and modern, but we were most interested in the songs that some say have got to go.
I'll join in with you on this one. Let us build a house where prophets speak and words are strong and true. There you go.
With the decree last year, a diocese in Missouri said this hymn, called All Are Welcome, was no longer welcome. It was banned from Mass. So was the hymn Bread of Life. 12 hymns in total were prohibited in the fall of 2024. A document from the Diocese of Jefferson City said they were found to be insufficient in sound doctrine. The ban was then quickly reversed, but it caught our attention and got us asking more questions about what kind of music belongs in Mass.
When you saw this list of hymns that had been banned briefly, what did you think about it?
I thought, wow, this is the first I've ever seen anything like this.
We spoke with the bishop behind the ban in November 2024, who confessed the decision to halt those hymns had been made too quickly.
I would hope everybody else learns from my mistake.
He said the policy was put in place without enough consultation from Catholics in his Missouri diocese. He's since been named the Archbishop of Kansas City, but at the time we spoke, Bishop Sean McKnight of Jefferson City had recently retracted the hymn ban.
Initially, how did people respond on both sides?
Yeah, there were those who were enthusiastic about banning certain hymns, and others were very dismayed, and some of their favorite hymns were on the list.
At this point, there's no ban on particular hymns, but parishes in the diocese are required to evaluate music they select using guidance provided by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in 2020, which was intended for the wider church across America. In Catholic hymnody at the service of the church, an aid for evaluating hymn lyrics, the bishops want to make sure selected hymns are in conformity with Catholic doctrine. They list a number of concerns, including hymns with deficiencies in the presentation of Eucharistic doctrine and hymns with a view of the church that sees her as essentially a human construction. The guidance appeared to direct the Diocese of Jefferson City from the start when they pointed out certain problematic songs.
Did you see where they were coming from, why they might?
I do see where they're coming from. I do.
Why
I definitely see where they're coming from because they want the right thing to be said in church. They don't want the wrong idea to get tossed around.
Callahan says what some hymns emphasize could be misleading. For example, he says wrong ideas about the Eucharist could be conveyed if songs merely describe it as the bread and wine instead of the body and blood of Christ. We looked at some of the lyrics in Bread of Life.
You are the bread of peace, you are the wine of joy.
You are the bread, you are the wine. I think just in actuality, it's going to detract from the message you're trying to convey.
It could confuse people about the truth of the Eucharist?
It is. What we believe, that, the body and blood, soul and divinity of Christ is here at the Mass, in the Eucharist, then the songs, of course, should reflect that.
Another question to ask, do the songs reflect the divine origins of the church? Each verse in All Are Welcome begins with,
Let us build a house.
They all start, let us build, let us, we, us, the people, the human aspect of the church.
Instead of
God.
But there are other aspects of music to consider as well.
It's often associated with memories and emotions, too, and that's a part of our celebration of the Eucharist. It's not just a thing of the mind. It's not just a doctrinal assent. It's also a movement of the heart, and ultimately, it's active prayer.
And a wider mass music conversation becomes more complex when you consider all the different opinions. Archbishop McKnight acknowledged people in the pews come with their own tastes and preferences. So how do we lift our song in the right direction?
Hymns that are liked by the people are a good choice. But it's also important that they convey the Catholic faith. It's about discernment of the will of God and what the Holy Spirit wants, not just what I like. And that's the important element.
What do we know about the church historically when it has spoken about music? Are there any principles or themes or what can you tell us?
There is thousands and thousands of years of church music, and that over time, the Gregorian chant has earned pride of place within the liturgy of the Mass.
Gregorian chant. Callahan's insight comes in part from the Second Vatican Council, held in Rome between 1962 and 1965. Catholic bishops from all over the world gathered and spoke about many topics, including sacred liturgy and music. The document Sacrosanctum Concilium reads in part, "The Church acknowledges Gregorian chant as specially suited to the Roman liturgy. Therefore, other things being equal, it should be given pride of place in liturgical services." Still, Callahan believes preserving this musical treasure of the Church, found in some parishes but lacking in many liturgies, could be quite challenging.
I wouldn't walk into a church and say, hey, we're going to be doing Gregorian chant right now. They're going to be like, what is that? I have no clue what that is.
Dr. Sarah Pecknold, visiting assistant professor of liturgical music at Christendom College, describes some of the qualities found in Gregorian chant.
We find gentleness in regard to rhythm. There's always a sense of elevation to it and transcendence.
Gregorian chant began developing around the 8th century, and it's not just one style of music among many. It stands out because of the intention behind its creation.
Gregorian chant, beyond a shadow of a doubt, was developed with and for the liturgy. The Second Vatican Council teaches us that the more closely tied the music is to the liturgical action, what's actually taking place at the liturgy, the more sacred it is.
For centuries, the text, or words of Mass, have been chanted, and you can still hear it in many liturgies today. And one bishop believes an important distinction in the Mass music discussion can be made here. Bishop Carl Kimmey of Wichita said, "What I desire most for sacred music in the liturgy is to shift our mindset from singing at Mass to singing the Mass." In a letter on sacred music addressed to his diocese in 2023, Bishop Kimmey suggested parishes could start by singing the entrance, offertory, or communion texts already chosen for Mass by the Church to reflect liturgical occasions. He writes, "Rather than entering into a discussion about which hymns may or may not be appropriate for use in the Mass, my humble guidance is to turn our attention toward the text of the Mass, which the Church herself invites us to sing." If it's unfamiliar to a parish, Dr. Pecknold says small steps could be taken to begin chanting the texts of Mass found in the Roman Missal.
I would first start with the very simplest chant melodies for the ordinaries of the Mass.
Beyond Gregorian chant, the Second Vatican Council spoke more broadly, saying, "The Church approves of all forms of true art having the needed qualities and admits them into divine worship, while reminding Catholics of the purpose of sacred music."
Liturgical music should glorify God, and it should sanctify and edify all of us who are present at this great sacrifice.
I have a love for the principles of liturgy.
Dave Moore was the music director at the National Eucharistic Congress last year in Indianapolis. It was his job to bring together a wide variety of Catholic musicians from across the country. And uniting different styles came naturally, considering his upbringing.
I actually came from a background of serving in a traditional Latin Novus Ordo liturgy. By high school, I was playing guitar and bass and keyboards and in a lot of praise bands. And I've just seen kind of a lot of aspects of the church, and I love all those aspects.
He says the goal for music at the Eucharistic Congress, which drew tens of thousands, was unity over uniformity, a unity rooted in Christ.
I don't know how you find unity without diversity, right? So like there's a lot of people who do things differently than we're used to, but what we're looking for is the heart. Like, are you pursuing the heart of God?
On any given Sunday, what might that sound like? Pursuing the heart of God.
Catholicity means there's a universality to who we are, that we're not of just one kind or one culture, but there's a diversity of charisms and a diversity of styles even.
While music might sound different from one parish to another, Archbishop McKnight reminds us all Catholics share the same faith in Jesus Christ and the Church he gave us.
Have mercy.
And the fact that there are different ways of entering into the mystery of Christ actually increases the unity that we have. Otherwise, we're just a church of some and not the church of all.
Mark Irons, EWTN News In Depth.
Our thanks to these expert voices who helped explain both in word and in song what many of us likely don't even think about in Mass as we're surrounded by the beauty of music. In a historic People First this week, Pope Leo XIV makes a personal video message appeal for Catholics to be generous on this World Mission Sunday.
I urge every Catholic parish in the world to take part in World Mission Sunday. Your prayers, your support will help spread the gospel, provide for pastoral and catechetical programs, help to build new churches, and care for the health and educational needs of our brothers and sisters in mission territories.
The Pope's video message was recorded in English, Spanish, and Italian. World Mission Sunday is held every year on the second to last Sunday of October. This year, the theme is Missionaries of Hope Among the Peoples. The Sunday is a chance for the global church to pray in particular for missionaries and for the fruits of their labors. Monsignor Roger Landry, National Director of the Pontifical Mission Societies in the USA, is responsible for coordinating for the Vatican the World Mission Sunday collection. He reflected on how Pope Leo's own background as a missionary made his video message especially compelling.
Just a couple weeks ago when I was with him in Rome, he celebrated a Mass in which he reminded the world that everybody in the church is called by our baptism to be a missionary. That is a call that he took literally and seriously, becoming an Augustinian missionary himself. But now he's the chief missionary of the church. He's the successor of the fisherman from Galilee whom Jesus sent out as a fisher of men. And he's asking you and me and everybody watching to help him help missionaries all across the globe. And that's what his 1-minute video conveys very powerfully.
We are so grateful for our Catholic missionaries as we keep them especially close in prayer this World Mission Sunday. And that does it for this edition of EWTN News In Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. We hope you'll join us again same time next week for more news and reports important to your Catholic life. Until then, God bless.